All right, my name is Andrew Green. I am glad to welcome you into another episode of the Idea Collision here, where we kind of mash some ideas together, history or culture. We've been talking about kind of emotional health and various related topics. We're kind of going around in a circle of things that are all related to, but not necessarily sequentially. So if you've been here with us before, then you kind of know how I set this up. But for someone who might be joining, I will kind of explain it really for the just so you kind of get a feel of how the podcast works. I like to have, say, an idea or two, of just a general kind of philosophical sort of a thought. Maybe combine it with some other type of a thought or event, and really I like to leave it with not just some high-minded philosophy of sorts, but really to look at how it affects us practically in life, and not just me individually, but to see kind of how we're a part of an interacting whole in the world around us. And then, of course, mostly to leave you with a spiritual thought. I don't always necessarily give a Bible verse or explore a Bible verse. Is not really what I do here. I do that in other settings. I'm a minister. So we do that in that settings, or in that setting. And I have a podcast where I just upload our churches and our sermons and classes, things like that. But I more like to focus on the things that affect us as groups of human beings, whether it be in a larger society or in a kind of a subgroup of some sort. You may not, therefore, personally feel everything, because even within a society as a whole, or we talk about generations a lot, there are exceptions. Not everybody identifies, not everybody that's, 70 right now identifies with the baby boomer generation or what have you. But I do try to make it broad enough that people kind of either they've experienced these things or they understand it from a perspective of observing the culture around them. And so you are fairly well linked to other people one way or the other. Speaking of links, I tend to post links at the end of things that I think are beneficial, whether it be through our church or through ministries that I'm a part of outside of church. So do feel free to take advantage of those, and always share and subscribe. Encourage others to subscribe. I hope this benefits you in some way. That's the purpose of this, is to leave you with something valuable. So I want to try to discussing some things. My family's getting ready to leave for spring break. If you're leaving for spring break, then I don't want to see you on my crash dash on my Instagram or whatever that's called. So one of the things you can do is, if you like to watch this, you can. One of those links is to ways to listen to the audio. Download it and listen to that. So I'm stuck here and doing various things, and one of them is recording this podcast, which I actually enjoy doing. It's not a chore for me. So if you do listen, and every once in a while I do refer to a graphic or sometimes post a video that relates. So that link is there as well. All right, the housekeeping is over. I want to get into something. Today is going to border. I try to avoid this typically, but it's going to border on something controversial. I don't really like to do that a lot. But sometimes things that are on the border of controversial really illustrate a point well that I'm trying to make, and this one does. I try to do so with humor if I do, and I try to do it fairly even-handed when possible. So I'm not a person who just brings up stuff for controversy's sake. I don't like those kind of podcasts. They annoy me even when I agree with the point that's being made. So I'm not trying to stir the pot just to get reaction. Do understand that. We've been talking about the emotional effects of decisions that are made, and primarily where we've been focusing on is when a person makes rules, these rigid rules that they have because of events in their past, and then obviously if a generation has these rules, or similar events, they're likely to make as a generation new rules that damage themselves and end up hurting a new generation. We've talked about how that can even end up, the new rule that was made to avoid something can end up affecting people worse than the original harm that made the rule in the first place. Well, today I want to talk about another source of these, and I want to refer to some past events, recent past events, to illustrate this. And that is to illustrate how our identity, that's a word we hear a lot. If you hear that word and what's going on? He's going to talk about identity. That's not what I mean when I say identity. How I view myself is a lot of what shapes the decisions I make, how I define myself, and my view of who I am. So that makes my policies. And we have so many different types of things that we have that determine who our identity is. We'll get into some of those. I want to look at something that happened as an event, and it kind of illustrates this. I don't know if you've ever been in all of us have been in a situation. It varies where you're at when this happens, but usually some sort of public place. You're coming out of a store, someone's coming in a store, and you both kind of accidentally line up, and then you do this thing where you do this dance, right? Like we both go this way, and then we're both gonna go that way, and we kind of try to figure out how we're going to get past this other person. As you're in this synchronized thing, and you somehow, one of you has to say, listen, I'm going that way, and you point to where you're going, and then they're okay to go the other way. Okay, we managed to get past that. If we go back to, say, late summer, early fall, we were kind of got into this situation where we saw this. Actually, it was more, I would say, fall and then into the winter technically, but the events for it set up in summer. And if you go back and think about, and I really don't want to trigger anybody, I don't even like the word trigger, it's triggering, but this event happened. And if you go back in the evenings, I remember listening to news, and I consumed a lot of news. I consume a lot less news now than I did at that point. But I remember, you would see updates. You wanted to know what was going on in the world, and news was one of our ways to stay in tune with stuff, and we all felt a part of what was happening in the world at that time. And typically what was happening for a while there, every evening, or mostly every evening, we were getting updates on the health situation that we were in, and Donald Trump he was the president at the time, and he would say something, and standing next to him was Dr. Fauci. On the other side was Dr. Birx, or maybe they would give some updates, and he was standing there, and the discussion was of a vaccine that was coming. I know you hear vaccine, but just bear with me. We're not going to talk about the vaccine. That's not what this is about. This just serves as an illustration of identity and how we make policies for ourselves. And so I remember a similar event to what I saw then, just to pause it there. I remember I was driving, so I was listening at the time to a Super Bowl with, I think it was Dallas and Buffalo, I want to say. It was like in 92 or 91. No, it wasn't 91. I know that. It was, I think, in 92. And I remember, Dallas was blowing Buffalo out of the water at the time. And it was towards the end of the game, and here we were headed for another touchdown, and the Dallas player was showboating a little bit on the way to what he thought was going to be spiking the football. And out of nowhere, from across across the field, comes this Buffalo defensive player who he was going to lose. He was on the verge of losing. There was no chance that they were going to come back. But he took it as a personal affront, and he got to the Dallas player and forced a fumble, and that guy didn't get to celebrate. It kind of ruined his personal moment of glory. And there was this moment, very similarly so, in the election of that year, where much of this surrounded this discussion of a possible vaccine, and all the people on one side were getting ready to celebrate this great victory and this great accomplishment. It kind of reminded me of that, and something happened on the way to, the second or the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and all of a sudden people didn't get to celebrate that victory that they thought was coming for the election, and all of a sudden all that great news about a vaccine was not benefiting them the way they thought that it was going to. So as they say, something happened on the way to a celebration. And I want to take you back to the viewpoint of the other side, because at the time they thought that, this was an unprecedented thing. The vaccine, every time, if you turned on like a daytime talk show or evening, cable news network or something like that, certain groups, and who they were, thought that at the time in the spring, summer, and then early fall, that coming vaccine was the greatest thing since the invention of the wheel. And then the election happened. Now, leading up to that point, the other side of the aisle, politically, socially, whatever, they were very skeptical of the vaccine. It was almost like Donald Trump was, in the back room of the Oval Office with a witch's cauldron, mixing up the vaccine. It was like a eyebrow of Sean Hannity, cigar ash from Rush Limbaugh, and making this evil potion, and so they were very, very, very skeptical, and so there were two very opposite sides leading up to the election. Then the election happened. Now, different people were going to get credit for things. And so now you had this dance that took place where two sides realized that they wanted to be on the other side of the issue. And so it was like, how are we going to get there? I'm going to have to kind of somehow skirt you without touching you because you're like a leper to me. And then you can have this area, and then we'll have the other side of the aisle, and we'll be okay. And in the meantime, we're getting really dangerously close to each other. And it was really this awkward 3 or 4 weeks. But in a span of 3 to 4 weeks, I don't remember who shifted first. Someone pointed, I'm going there. Okay, and then I'm going there. And we'll hold the opposite view, and I'll be what you were 3 weeks ago. So I don't remember who it was that went first. But in 3 or 4 weeks, the rock-ribbed conservatives, suddenly looked like anti-vax hippies, from the 60s. And, whereas they had just thought that this vaccine was the greatest achievement of our lifetimes, now, all of a sudden, they couldn't have anything to do with it. On the other hand, the other side of the aisle suddenly found themselves with these conservatives invading their airspace. And so that was highly uncomfortable. So now, without Trump in the picture, it was safe for that group to become very friendly with Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci especially. And so now they were safe. All of a sudden, he became a national hero, which he was not prior to, because he was connected to a certain person. And all of a sudden, people who were very, very skeptical, and I know them, you probably know them, were very skeptical of the vaccine, now didn't have enough arms for all the places that they wanted to put all these needles. Right? Why? Well, how did it happen? Okay, we're going to end the vaccine talk. Just, if you're nervous now, I tried to be even-handed, right? Because both sides were silly. How did two groups find? I don't care what you think about that issue. The fact is that two sides switched overnight. If you're on one side and you think it was the greatest thing, then there was a moment in time where you did not think it was the greatest thing. 95% chance of that. Very few people stayed where they were before and then after. How did groups get this exact 180-degree opposite view in like 3 weeks? It was that fast. That is a sociological anomaly. That doesn't happen. Over generations, yes. I can show you how conservatives believe something different than they did a decade or two ago. And the other same on the other side. I can show you that. But how did it happen that fast? So I want to share with you my theory. Okay. And you've heard us talk. We've talked about Sigmund Freud a little bit before, and so Freud had some theories. He talked about the id and the ego and the superego. I want to introduce to you a different part of your psyche, and that is what I call your IMA. What's an IMA? Well, if you want to know what your IMA is, all you have to do is answer or complete the sentence. IMA. IMA what? And that's your IMA. And this is a determining factor, right? It's your identity. Whatever you say, IMA, and you finish that, that will determine or be a part of the determining factors in the directions that you have, the rules that you make for yourself, the policies that you set for your life. What's your IMA? Your IMA can be anything, but your identity will determine your direction, right? It can be lots of stuff. And right now, because of this event that happened, right now, politically, the political identity of things is the strongest one that people are in right now. I don't know if that's because we were trapped in our houses and we watched stuff or heard stuff. I don't know. But somehow in the last, it goes really before that. It's somehow in the last 10 years, politics has, maybe 15 years, maybe it's just the internet has made all this stuff more a part of our life. So we consume so much more. I grew up, when I was 8th grader or 9th grader, I didn't know the words Republican and Democrat. I didn't know what those were, really. It wasn't a part of my world. Now kids know what that is, and politics is such a strong part of people's identity. So that even now, everything gets filtered through that. Weather gets filtered. You watch the Weather Channel. You're getting politics. You watch anything at all. You cannot watch it. You go to school. Your kids go to school. They're learning math. They're getting politics. Everything is filtered through politics. Marriages are breaking up over politics. I forget who it was. They might still be married. But I remember, who was it? It was, there was a news commentator that was married. He was a prominent liberal commentator. He was married, he's from Louisiana, and I can't remember. He was married to a prominent conservative person, and they had a successful marriage. It was, how can you do that? Right? Well, there was a time when everything wasn't filtered through politics, right? That you could have views, and those were views, and that was a side. But now life has to be through this. We're going to come back to it, not specifically, but just to the concept. Why? So I'm a conservative. I'm a liberal or progressive. I'm a whatever. IMA can be your employment, by the way. I'm a doctor. I'm a union worker. I'm a farmer. A lot of these will also be connected to your politics because politics is so overarching right now. For some, it's ethnicity or nationality, which are slightly different. I'm a Hispanic. I'm an American. I'm a whatever. It can be economic. I'm a rich person. I'm a successful person. I'm a poor person. It can be your social status, like I'm an educated person. Your location. I'm an Easterner. I'm a Westerner. I'm a Midwesterner. Right? All sorts of identities. And what happens is that these all determine the rules we make for ourselves. So that, the closer something is to our the closer something is to our core, the more weight it carries. So I might have multiple IMAs. Whichever one is strongest to my core as my identity, that is going to have more pull. So sometimes people will do things that are out of character, which is why you go back and you take two people with opposite politics that can have a successful marriage. Obviously, their politics were secondary to their identity as a married person in this relationship that was more valuable to them. So they could maintain it and go, oh, right, so you're an idiot because you have this view. Oh, no, you're dumb because you have this view, but I still love you. Right? That could happen. Now, no, politics is the most important thing, so the politics will, okay, you're this. I can't like you now. I can't even admit that we're blood related now because you have this viewpoint. And there are people like that. So it all determines what is more core. Well, what is so that brings us back to this question of how people could contradict themselves so quickly, and to do that, I want to introduce one more factor, and that is that the more substance your IMA has, this is my theory. Okay, the more substance it has, the less contradictory it is. So stuff with actual real material substance, it doesn't move or shift. Right? It has mass, it has density. So it doesn't change that much. So the more superficial something is, the more prone to change. Right? So things like a marriage where there's a vow that usually, or used to at least, have more pull on something. Your identity, you will see people whose identity, you're born a certain way, right? So if I'm born and my identity is, listen, I'm a black person, or I'm a Mexican, or I'm a whatever, those are parts of your identity that you don't even control because you are that. So there will be people who will contradict what people think. Why would you have that view? But because that's a part of their identity. That's much more closer to the core. So they might act out of character what you think they should do because they have something that's of more substance than something else. So I thought here's a ethnicity and but you have this other thing that's important to you, your job or whatever that's important to you, but you might act out of character because why? Because your ethnicity defines you more so, and so you will do things that are maybe not in line with what most people of that career are doing because you have something stronger. So it's got more substance. Well, so why did people shift a political view? Well, because the political realm has almost no substance to it. And this is interesting. Politics, while it's one of the most important identities to people today, has the least substance of virtually anything. You think about it, like policy, a nation's policy is so changeable. There's no weight to it. It is constantly changing. People have constant new opinions. There's new things being theorized all the time. so that people are basing their life on something with zero substance, pretty close to zero substance. And so they contradict themselves. And you can see it shift. As I said, you can go back years and years and see how people believe, political parties believe in something so opposite. So much so that the entire map of our electoral system is flipped from where it was. You think about the areas that got Abraham Lincoln elected. It was the Northeast. The Northeast got a Republican elected. You couldn't do that today. That would not be a winning policy. Why? Because things change. Right? It's politics. It is subject to change. It has no density, no mass at all. Well, it's just completely superficial. And so if we're going to have an identity that forms my personal policies, forget about national policies, just personal, this is the direction I want to go with my life. It is important for me then to pick things and develop identities out of things that are valuable. You could have, again, something that's take jobs, for example. That's not too controversial. You could have a job. I'm trying to think of one, but if you had a career and your career suddenly changed and the values of that new career were different, well, that career is very superficial also. It might be a little more important to you than your politics. Personally speaking, your job is very important to you, but you switch and all of a sudden you'd find that, well, this is what people in this job think. Well, like we go back to union workers. Well, I'm a union worker. Well, if you suddenly got a job as a union, in a non-union shop, because that's the only place you could find a job, guarantee you suddenly would not be very pro-union, right? Because why? Because your identity has changed. And this is the encouragement that I want to leave you with. Is a little bit shorter today, not a lot, but a few minutes shorter. I want you to go and investigate what are things that are central to the policies that you establish. What is it really? I'm a what? What is most substantial? And sadly, the part that is most central to all of us, whether we know it or not, or should be, it is one that is almost never addressed, or never addressed in a really serious way. And I think we all recognize it, at least subconsciously, but our spiritual side is least emphasized. We're all so busy pursuing careers and education and making sure we know what everybody else thinks politically and sociologically and all these other areas. These are all so important. We have to, if you believe, what do you believe about this? And we have to know the filter on what we think about this within a political field. That spirituality is often the one that is left out in the cold. And that is the one that has the most substance. Who you are is not your political view, really, at the end of it. Who you are is much deeper than what you do for a living. Who you are is much more important, much more substantial than where you went to college or what you studied in college. Those are just aspects of your experiences. Who you are spiritually, the things that really form your identity, that is the most valuable thing. That will, when you establish that, you will establish something that is bedrock. And people who make that type of a bedrock identity are much less prone to, or make it the correct way, are much less prone to contradiction, are much less prone to volatility. There's less upheaval in their life, right? Because and that is going to lead to a much greater contentment, a much more stable environment that you will create, because your policies will be based on that. So I encourage you to go out and investigate yourself. Do some introspection. What is it? Answer the question, what is my IMA? what IMAs are most important to me. And if they are politics, really, I could not care less what side of things you take. But if it is politics in general, regardless of what side you are on, you're really like in a tree in a hurricane. You're in a very volatile situation, and you're not going to find happiness there. I promise you. Really, true, genuine contentment is going to be in addressing your spiritual self. So do I again encourage you to follow some of our links and some of those other links have deeper discussions of these areas that we do. So, all right, have a good week.